Good morning. My name is Rachitaa Gupta. I am from the Global Campaign to Demand Climate Justice. I publicly declare that I have no conflicts of interest in relation to the fossil fuel industry or other polluting industries, and I also invite others to declare the same. We are holding this press conference to express a deep outrage of the climate movement at the ongoing genocide in Palestine. As Israel continues its brutal campaign of bombing, massacres, and starvation against the innocent civilian population in Gaza, many of the actors and states like the US, UK, Europe, France, Germany, that are directly responsible for these crimes walk the halls of the climate negotiations. We are here to remind them that you cannot separate climate justice and the cause of Palestinian liberation. We are here to remind people of the deep interlinkages between the intersecting crisis of climate, capitalism, colonialism, militarism, violence, and genocide. We refuse to be silent. Those responsible will be held to account, and justice will prevail. We have a very powerful lineup today, and we will start with Mohammed Usrof from Palestine Institute for Climate Strategy.
Hi, everybody. My name is Mohammed Usrof, and I hereby disclose that I have no conflicts of interest with the fossil fuel companies or any Zionist entity. It is our second SB meeting since the genocide has begun, our fourth UN climate conference overall, and every time we sit here and tell you why you should care, we hear nothing back. It has only gotten worse, and it is worse first and foremost for the people of Gaza. Every single day, we hear about another 100 Palestinians killed. In the past few months, the blockade has escalated so significantly that more and more reports of people, mostly children and elderly, starving to death. People are risking their lives walking several kilometers to get to food, only to be shot once they get there. As for the climate, just last month, a group of British researchers just came out with a report that estimated that the damages caused by this genocide is approximately that of 100 countries annually combined. That is more than half of the UN member states combined. So while we're eagerly waiting countries' NDCs and how they will slash emissions this year, remember that stopping this genocide will do more than most of those NDCs combined to cut fossil fuel use. And it's not just this genocide. Military emissions account for 5.5% of global emissions, and the EU reports put that above Russia's entire annual emissions, and if military emissions were a country, they would be the fourth most emitting nation, just behind China, the US, and India. And it's not stopping either. Gas licenses and exploration licenses are being issued right now. The world is perpetuating even more climate harm to keep killing and displacing people. And what remains of the energy transition? After forced blackouts, Palestinians in Gaza resorted to using solar panels for their electricity, proving the power in having sources that are not reliant on fossil fuel extraction, and that is not meant to romanticize Palestinians, but only to show their resilience and resistance during such horrible atrocities and times. And even then, these solar panels were bombed as well. But how about those who work at the conferences for better agricultural practices? In Gaza, over 82% of cropland has been destroyed, and the soil is so laden with toxic materials and heavy metals that bombardments have made it nearly impossible to grow anything that isn't potentially harmful to human health. The air is thick with the same toxic chemicals harmful to both the environment and human health. It is little wonder that miscarriages have increased by 300% in Gaza, according to figures gathered of last year. It is an ecocide as well as a genocide, and I don't think I need to tell you why you should care that this is happening in our world. And this is a call from the Palestinian Institute for Climate Strategy to care about people, not only Palestinians, but trade unions and activists who have put to harm, and we are calling for an energy embargo alongside other Palestinian groups. The main idea is that we wish to call for all people in the UNFCCC space, in the climate talks space, to reevaluate why we do negotiations and to consider the urgency of today's work. And it's not only that, it is why we do the work and why we care about climate and why we care about justice. It is not just buzzwords, they're not just keywords, they have people, lives, and stories behind them. And the key thing here is that we all do this kind of work to protect human life first and foremost. So if we do care about human life, and if we really wish to achieve the protection of human life, then we ought to name and call out climate and environmental projects and organizations and complicit entities to stop the genocide and to stop the ecocide in Gaza and to allow the Palestinian story to reveal itself and unravel. And I'll pass it on to the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mohammed. We'll now hear from Hajar Al-Beltaji from Angry.
Thank you so much, Rachitaa. I also disclose that I'm not attached to any conflict of interest or any Zionist fossil fuel companies. So at first, I'm starting with one of the very prominent Arabic poems by Amal Donqul about the atrocity and agony of Palestinian people. He said, لا تصالح ولو منحوك الذهب أترى حين أفقأ عينيك وأضع مكانهما جوهرتين أترى هي أشياء لا تشترى. Translated as, don't reconcile. Even if they give you gold, I wonder if I were to gouge out your eyes and replace them with 2 gems, would you see? This reminds us with the ongoing atrocities and colonialism in Palestine for over than 76 years. But it all has started before that, for 100 years ago, when an English white man called Balfour gave himself the right to promise a land that he doesn't own to people who don't own. And this was the mere foundation of colonialism project in Palestine. So, as the white media tries to portray it, it started on October 7, it didn't. So this whole foundation of the settler colony was supported by the whitest and colonialist supremacists in Europe, USA, whom for 100 years have been stealing lands, giving it to white people. So we see in Palestine that an indigenous Palestinian do not have any right to his land, but a white person from USA or Europe does. Let's just remember the fact that Israel is the cancer that grows in our region, or as we call it, Southwest Asia and North Africa. We will never accept, we will never stop fighting until the madness of slaughtering of Palestinians stops. Palestine have been suffering colonialism and systematic oppression against aid workers, doctors, journalists for 76 years. The settler colony is not just fighting attacks, not fighting any soldiers. They're just fighting against civilians. They're killing to tightening their apartheid regime and apparatus over Palestine. Also, all this genocide has been unfolding because of the US and EU military support, which is approximately in millions. So USA alone have been aiding $22 billion to fund the military aid in Palestine since October 7th. Not to mention the numbers of military funding since the start of this colonialist project. We still need to remember that the people of Palestine, they're not victims, they're fighting their rights, they're fighting for liberation, and they're just rooted to their land as their olive tree is. شجرة الزيتون لا تموت كما لا تموت فلسطين. So we are here saying it again, no business as usual. In the time of genocide, we're here to escalate. We're here to keep reminding ourselves and others that Palestine will be free and this colonial project, settlement colonial project will come to an end. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hajar. We'll now hear from Fatma Khafagy from Women and Gender Constituency.
Thank you. I also joined the declaration made. In the name of the Women and Gender Constituency, we are bringing to you from the heart of Gaza women who are raising their voices, echoing through the rubble, the resistance which has never been witnessed by the whole world before. These women are, or have been actually, witnessing the most devastating human rights crisis in modern history, which is the ongoing genocide against Palestinian people. Since October 2023, Israel is desperately trying to implement ethnic cleansing against Gaza, killing tens of thousands of lives, with women and children bearing the heaviest toll. I mean, they are 70% of the victims killed and injured in Gaza. This campaign of destruction, advanced by American and Western weaponry and international complicity of governments, has reduced Gaza's infrastructure to rubble, leaving millions without access to food or any essential services. Amidst this witnessed massacre, Palestinian women were and still are bearing the brunt of its horrors, displacement, as well as deprivation of water, land, confiscation, destruction of their agricultural land, and vulnerable to many climate crises and shocks. In addition, they also bear the loss of their loved ones and the relentless exposure to sexual and gender-based violence that they experience every day. We condemn all statements made on displacing Palestinians from Gaza to Egypt or Jordan or to anywhere, and we demand that the UN implements its resolution of the right of Palestinian people to self-determination, return, and independence. We have witnessed, actually, the lunatic leaders of America who are calling for the displacement of Palestinians from Gaza and building malls and hotels for tourists to come. He didn't even have the decency of saying that some of the Palestinians will be returning, if not all, actually, and they need schools, they need hospitals, they need employment, but now he's talking about hotels and malls for tourists from all over the world to go to Gaza as if he owns Gaza. Any talk about displacing the Palestinian is a hint of liquidating the Palestinian cause. After a year and 7 months of genocide, crimes of starvation, siege, killing of civilians, and after decades of occupation. We call for the activation of international law, international human rights treaties to confront war crisis and aggression carried out by the occupation against Palestinians and their forced displacement. We all call for the implementation of relevant UN resolutions to achieve international peace and security. We ask the West for stopping exportation of deadly weapons to Israel. Especially, we call on the permanent members of the UN Security Council to stop actually the exportation of weapons that is fueling all the fights and the crisis in our region. In the heart of Gaza, women rise, their voices echoing through the rubble, the resistance, and we are documenting hundreds and hundreds of stories of these women who are really trying to keep their land and not to sacrifice 1 inch of it, regardless of the horrors they face every day. We call for ceasing fire right now. We're calling for free Palestine and no climate justice without gender justice. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fatma. We'll now hear from Anna Sánchez from Global Energy Embargo for Palestine.
Hello, thank you. I'm here representing the Global Energy Embargo for Palestine, a global campaign that calls on a state to impose an immediate energy embargo on Israel. Israel is using energy as a tool of oppression, as a tool of control, energy, coal, crude oil, jet fuel, these are not neutral commodities. They are used to fuel an ongoing genocide, and these must be stopped immediately. Countries like Colombia, South Africa, Russia are exporting the coal that is being used to power Israeli electricity grid, which does not differentiate between Israel and the illegal settlements in occupied Palestinian land. It is used to power also the artificial intelligence that is surveilling and killing Palestinians. Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, and Brazil, among other countries, are sending crude oil that is powering the Israeli military, along with the jet fuel provided by the US that is fueling the tanks and warplanes that are assassinating and massacring children in Palestine. This must end. It is not a political choice. It is a legal obligation. It is an obligation for all states to end their complicity. The EU is also complicit by normalizing their trade relations with Israel. They are still importing Israeli gas through the East Med pipeline, and this is making the EU and its member states deeply complicit in the ongoing genocide against the Palestinian people. As the global energy embargo for Palestine, we're calling on workers to block all commodities related to energy, to block ports, to track shipments of energy that is transported by maritime transfers, with very high CO2 emissions that are also jeopardizing the sustainability of our planet. We're calling on people to pressure their states and authorities to impose sanctions on Israel. We cannot keep on going doing business as usual. Energy is being used as a tool of oppression, and it should be used to power life and not a genocide.
Thank you so much, Anna. Lastly, we will hear from Amiera Sawas from Climate Action Network.
Thank you. Climate Action Network is a network of hundreds of organisations committed to decolonisation, justice, equity, international cooperation and freedom, and we strongly oppose all forms of discrimination, military occupation, racism and violence, including the genocide of the Palestinian people. And I disclose that I do not have any conflict of interest with fossil fuel companies or Zionist interests. Governments are funding genocide, occupational and regional devastation, which is getting more and more severe by the hour, rather than climate action. If we just look at some of the biggest donors of military aid to Israel, the US has invested over $20 billion in US dollars in aid to Israel since the end of 2023. But if you look at the many decades before, you're talking about $225 billion in aid, which is approximately 71% of its aid from all sources. The UK government granted 108 licenses for military and non-military controlled goods to Israel since October 2023. And last year, although it feigned action by suspending some military licenses, when you look at the export licenses from the UK to Israel, they only suspended 30 of 350 arms export licenses and have subsequently, in the 3 months after that suspension, approved over 169 million worth of military equipment to Israel. Germany, I don't need to go into too much detail, we're in the heart of it, has approved over 550 million worth of arms exports to Israel since October 2023, including a 4 billion euro deal on the Arrow 3 missile system. So we have a lot of money for occupation, for genocide, for war, displacement, but we don't have it for climate finance. That's interesting. And the genocide is violence on every single scale, including ecocide. So I don't need to repeat what my colleagues have already said, but just some additional pieces. More than 100,000 tons of bombs have been dropped on Gaza, exceeding the total amount of explosives used in World War II in that tiny strip of land. We talked about the carbon footprint. Military emissions are not counted here, which is problematic. Researchers estimate that the long-term climate cost of the destruction in Gaza and the recent military exchanges or military attacks on Yemen, Iran, Lebanon, and now Syria is equivalent to running 84 gas power plants for a year. And by April this year, over 80% of Gaza's total cropland area had been damaged. It feels vile having to make an environmental justification when it's genocide of people's lives, But if we think about the long-term impacts of environmental destruction on human lives and on our climate goals, this is extremely severe and long-term. I mean, you just have to look at the Paris Agreement says that climate change is a global emergency that goes beyond national borders, which requires international cooperation and coordinated solutions at all levels, and implementing it is essential for the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. But at the same time, we're willing to destroy environmental lands, ecosystems, people's lives, which will affect them for generations, not for a couple of years. Look at all the work year on year that negotiators put in here and in the COP space to get tiny concessions on financing from north to south, finance that's driving a major debt crisis, that it comes with costs, it's loans, it's not public finance, it's not grants, but for unending human violations and environmental destruction, there's billions at no cost. Then let's talk about fossil fuels. So fossil fuels are the biggest driver of climate change, driving over, I think, 86% of carbon emissions in our atmosphere over the last 10 years. And they're directly funding genocide and war. And there's so much evidence historically to show this. So we have to ask ourselves, what is all this work for that we're doing here if we're not going to address the root causes of these human rights violations and ecocide? We're dragging the planet into World War III at the expense of innocent people, currently all over the Middle East, but also in Africa, Latin America, South Asia, and other parts of the world. The root causes are patriarchal, white supremacist leaders allied with capitalist extractivist models. As Kara Daggett puts it, petromasculinity right in all of our faces. They're interested in consolidating their wealth and power, extracting from the earth, and violently quashing anyone who doesn't look like, sound like, or agree with them. You can look at the fossil fuel profits. I mean, I don't have time to go into that now, but the 5 largest oil majors earned over $102 billion in profits just last year alone. Institutional investors hold $4.3 trillion in bonds and shares of fossil fuel companies. But the final kind of piece is that when countries are under attack, they can't access climate finance. And there's a lot of evidence to show that the most conflict-affected countries in the world receive very small amounts in climate finance compared to other countries. So how should a country like Palestine, and let's be honest, people and countries under attack by the genocidal regime in Syria, Lebanon, and Iran, how can they access climate finance that we're talking about here fairly? If we're serious about climate action, let alone human rights and international law, we have to be honest with ourselves. This genocide and this attempt to drive a regional war is going to drive climate vulnerabilities and loss and damage for the next 100 years at least. And we know this because countries now are still experiencing escalating unfair debt, being blocked from fair investment into renewable energy, and experiencing worse loss and damage precisely because of the colonial violence that they endured 30, 50, or 100 years ago. So this is a multi-generational genocide and crisis, and it must stop now. And finally, please, nations of the global north, do not say that you represent your constituents if you're funding and enabling this genocide, because we know from people on the streets that that's not true. Ordinary people everywhere want this to stop, and we expect you as negotiators and representatives of those countries and those people to talk about that and call to action to end this genocide now here. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Amiera. We'll now take questions from the floor. We'll prioritize any journalists, so please introduce yourself and your media house before asking your question. And then we also invite others to ask any questions to our panelists.
Hi, the press conference is titled End the Siege. My sense is that it was referring to the efforts that are being made by activists around the world to end the siege. We saw the Freedom Flotilla. We're now seeing activists gathered in Cairo. What would you say to movements and peoples around the world? What is your message to them?
Thank you. Well, I think we can say a lot about that in this space. When we are talking about climate justice, I think it was made very clear that there is no climate justice without Palestinian liberation. So I think that's a message that we should all convey and keep in our minds during not only the next 2 weeks, but until Palestine is free. I think it is important to, again, raise awareness about the Palestinian call for a global energy embargo, to put pressure on states and also on private corporations that are profiting from genocide and apartheid. Companies like SOCAR, BP, or Chevron are getting profits from these war crimes and crimes against humanity, and they should be not only ashamed but held responsible for their actions. And I think as individuals or persons who are concerned for human rights, for justice and dignity, we should endorse and amplify the call for boycott, divestment, and sanctions. We should boycott apartheid, we should divest from genocide, and definitely call for sanctions on these crimes against humanity until Palestine is free.
I'll take the question as well, just to say that the Flotilla Coalition, alongside many other initiatives, have expanded and broadened our sort of political imagination as to what one can do to end the siege. We've seen many sort of other sort of flotilla attempts and other sailing attempts to sort of feed the people of Gaza and to allow humanitarian aid to enter, but it's the same with the marches in Egypt and also throughout North Africa. The only concern here is whether that would actually allow us to end the siege momentarily or sort of in the short run. But it remains a fact that this has allowed us to think about what people can actually do and who actually has the power. We have seen the complicity and the negligence and the lack of accountability in our international system, and that sort of nation states have fallen short of. And thus it is time for people to act. And I think besides the sort of protests and grassroots mobilizations that we've seen across cities and countries, sailing to Gaza was one of the sort of biggest attempts to end the siege. And I think that is sort of just incredibly organized. Not only that, not only is it a message to the people that we can act, it's also a message to how Israel continues to violate not only international waters and the sort of very essence of human life and its dignity, but also Palestinian waters through the continuous supplying of gas to the European Union, and Germany being a country that we're in, that remains extremely complicit to both the flotilla's attacks and the attacks on Gaza's fishermen and the attacks on the fishing industry and the attacks on the Palestinian people. So I think the flotilla is a significant narrative, a significant message, and we've seen the attacks on conscience a month ago, and we've seen how the sieger of the recent flotilla attempt also sort of went through. So all the respect to them, and I think we should continue expanding our efforts and expanding the horizon to sort of this kind of political activism moving forward. Thank you.
I think also the movements that are witnessing from all over the world, including the Madeleine ship, including the Safinat al-Hurriya, including the World March, starting from North Africa and joined by all over the world, are really admirable. In spite of all the challenges, the problems they are facing, but they are never stopping. On the contrary, they're becoming more organized, more determined. Just to look actually at the stopping of the authorities in Egypt of the World March, and until now, they are in Egypt. Some of them are in Egypt resisting, actually, and quickly they are also explaining to everybody the repercussions of what the autocratic authorities are doing. Like, I mean, for Egypt, which lives on tourism, they said, I mean, when you are treating people coming, from all over the world in order to break the siege, in order to have Gaza have some food for the children, for women, for everybody, and you're treating them this way, you are going to lose tourism. Nobody is going to go to Egypt. So I think actually the movements are really admirable. They will never stop. They'll become stronger.
Thank you so much, Fatma. That's the end for us. The panelists will also be available outside to address any additional questions. DCJ has a daily press conference here at 10 a.m. every day. Please join us tomorrow as well for our press conference with Global Energy Embargo for Palestine. And do visit DCJ at www.demandclimatejustice.org to read our statement to demanding an end to forced starvation and famine in Palestine. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.